A flag is never just a piece of cloth. It's a story, a promise, and a declaration. When Somaliland's green, white, and red flag appeared near the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, it was a political earthquake. This wasn't the flag of a recognized state, but of a nation that's existed in diplomatic limbo for over 3 decades. Its presence in Africa's political capital was a bold challenge to the continent's established order. Somaliland is not a fleeting rebel movement. It's a functioning, self-governing entity with a story of resilience. The flag's appearance forced Africa to confront a question it's long avoided: what makes a state? For years, Somaliland's pleas for recognition have been met with silence, justified by fears of instability and precedent. But the flag's appearance and shifting regional dynamics suggest this silence is no longer sustainable. The flag was more than an assertion of identity. It was a diplomatic maneuver, a test of the continent's resolve. The question of Somaliland is no longer just a domestic issue for Somalia. It's a continental dilemma demanding an answer. Africa's hesitation over Somaliland is rooted in the continent's post-independence compromise. The African Union, and before it the OAU, was built on the principle of respecting colonial borders, however arbitrary. This doctrine, uti possidetis juris, was seen as the only way to prevent endless border wars and fragmentation. The stability of the whole was prioritized over the self-determination of its parts. This principle explains why Africa's map has barely changed in 60 years, despite countless separatist movements. Recognizing one breakaway region, the thinking goes, would open the floodgates for others. The AU's stance isn't about malice toward Somaliland, but fear of a domino effect. Somaliland's case runs directly into this ideological wall. For the AU, recognizing Somaliland would be the first crack in the dam holding back chaos. The issue pits the AU's doctrine of territorial integrity against the real-world case of a peaceful democratic nation seeking its place in the world. Somaliland's story is one of self-reliance and quiet state-building. In 1991, as Somalia collapsed, leaders in the north, once British Somaliland, declared independence, arguing it was a restoration, not secession. For over 30 years, Somaliland has built its own government, currency, military, and held peaceful democratic elections. Its stability stands in stark contrast to the chaos in Mogadishu. Somaliland's leaders argue they're not redrawing borders, but reverting to their pre-Union colonial boundaries. The British Somaliland Protectorate was briefly independent in 1960 before joining Italian Somaliland to form Somalia. Despite this unique history and functioning statehood, formal recognition has remained elusive. The world engages with Somaliland pragmatically, but it remains a ghost nation in international law. Somaliland is a state in every sense, except on paper. The AU's reluctance is driven by fear of precedent. Somaliland isn't just one case, it's a potential trigger for secessionist movements across Africa. The continent's borders, drawn by colonial powers, contain thousands of ethnic groups within fragile states. Recognizing Somaliland could spark a chain reaction, undermining decades of state-building. Even a 2005 AU fact-finding mission acknowledged Somaliland's unique case, but the political will to act never materialized. The fear of chaos outweighed the merits of Somaliland's claim. The AU's stance is less about Somaliland's specifics, more about continental stability. Until leaders are convinced recognition won't open Pandora's box, Somaliland's flag will be met with caution. The flag's appearance in Addis Ababa was no accident. Its location reveals its significance. Ethiopia, landlocked and reliant on Djibouti's port, desperately needs alternative access to the sea. Somaliland's port of Berbera offers Ethiopia a vital new route. Ethiopia has invested heavily in Berbera's development, making Somaliland's stability a strategic imperative. Allowing the flag to fly near the AU signals Ethiopia's shifting stance, a form of quasi-recognition. It's a message. If the world ignores Somaliland, Ethiopia may act unilaterally to secure its interests. This move risks conflict with Somalia and challenges the AU's collective position. By elevating Somaliland's profile, Ethiopia is forcing the issue onto Africa's agenda. The economic and security benefits of engaging with Somaliland may now outweigh the diplomatic risks of inaction. For Somalia's government, Somaliland's independence is an existential threat, not a diplomatic debate. Mogadishu sees Somaliland as an inseparable region, not a separate country. Any recognition of Hargeisa is viewed as an assault on Somalia's sovereignty and unity. The dream of a greater Somalia, uniting all Somali-speaking peoples, is at stake. Somalia reacts fiercely to any move towards Somaliland's recognition, leveraging its international status to isolate Hargeisa. The country's own fragility heightens the stakes. Losing Somaliland would be a devastating blow to its legitimacy. For Mogadishu, unity is a red line. The debate is a zero-sum game. A victory for Somaliland's self-determination is seen as a fatal blow to Somalia's national integrity. The Horn of Africa is a crossroads of global interests, its location vital to world trade and security. Nearly a third of global shipping passes through its waters, making regional stability a global concern. Major powers, America, China, Turkey, the Gulf states, vie for influence, investing in ports, bases, and alliances. Somaliland's recognition is entangled in this geopolitical competition. For outside powers, a recognized Somaliland offers strategic advantages, bases, ports, and a partner against piracy and extremism. The UAE's investment in Berbera is a clear example, countering rivals' influence in Mogadishu. Every move is scrutinized and countered by others. China and Turkey back Somalia's unity, while Israel and the UAE warm to Somaliland. The fate of Somaliland is now a pawn in a larger global chess game. Its future will be shaped as much by foreign interests as by African decisions. For over 30 years, Somaliland's quest for recognition met a wall of silence until 2024. Israel's official recognition of Somaliland shattered the consensus, sending shockwaves across Africa and the Middle East. For the first time, a UN member state acknowledged Hargeisa's claim, celebrated in Somaliland's streets. Israel's motives were strategic, securing an ally opposite Yemen, countering Iranian influence, and protecting maritime trade. The AU responded swiftly, rejecting Israel's move and reaffirming Somalia's territorial integrity. Other nations, including Turkey, Egypt, and China, condemned the recognition. The debate is now an international crisis, not just an African issue. Israel's move hardened opposition within the AU and complicated the path to a solution. The Somaliland question is now impossible to ignore and infinitely more complex to resolve. The Somaliland flag in Addis Ababa was more than a provocation. It was a question Africa can no longer avoid. For decades, the continent managed the issue with silence and ambiguity, treating Somaliland as a problem to contain. But persistent state-building, Ethiopia's needs, and disruptive diplomacy have made the old status quo unsustainable. The core dilemma remains: uphold the sanctity of colonial borders, or recognize the reality of a peaceful, self-governing nation. The fear of Pandora's box is real, but so is the cost of ignoring Somaliland. The AU's credibility and regional stability are at stake. The flag is a symbol of this unavoidable choice, a challenge to Africa's political imagination. Is the continent ready to confront its colonial ghosts and build a future based on justice as well as stability? The debate is no longer about whether the question will be asked, but how it will be answered. The world is watching. Gap 2s. The story of Somaliland and its flag in Addis Ababa is not just about lines on a map, it's about the people who cross them, the dreams that drive them, and the futures they imagine. As Africa stands at this crossroads, the decisions made now will echo for generations. Will Somaliland's resilience inspire new pathways for recognition and cooperation, or will the continent retreat into old fears and familiar silence? Gap 2s. For Somalilanders, the journey continues. Building institutions, seeking allies and proving to the world, day by day, that their nation is more than an idea. For Africa, The challenge is to craft solutions that honor both justice and unity, to show that sovereignty can evolve without unraveling the fabric of peace. Gap 2s. The maps of tomorrow are unwritten. Whether Somaliland's story becomes a turning point or a cautionary tale depends on choices made in boardrooms, parliaments, and the hearts of millions. One thing is certain: the conversation has begun, and its outcome will shape the destiny of a continent. Gap 2s. The flag still flies, an invitation to imagine, to debate, and perhaps to change. Gap 2s. But beneath the headlines and diplomatic statements, there are voices rarely heard. Ordinary Somalilanders, neighbors in the Horn of Africa, and young Africans watching history unfold. Their hopes, doubts, and daily realities ripple far beyond any capital city. Gap 2s. In Hargeisa's bustling markets, merchants dream of passports that open more doors and trade that flows without barriers. In rural villages, elders recall unity and division, wondering what future their grandchildren will inherit. Across the continent, students debate Somaliland's fate in classrooms and online, seeing in its struggle a mirror for their own aspirations. Gap 2s. These voices remind us the story is not just about governments or borders, but about the lived experience of millions. Every flag, every recognition, or its absence, shapes lives in ways statistics can't capture. Gap 2s. As Africa redraws its future, it's these unseen borders of hope and hurt, of belonging and exclusion, that matter most. The next chapter will be written not just by leaders, but by the people whose stories have yet to be told. Gap 2s. The world may watch from a distance, but for those living this reality, every day is history in the making. Gap 2s. As dusk settles over Somaliland and the wider continent, the journey is far from over. The question of recognition remains unresolved, but the world's attention lingers, curious, cautious, and compelled by possibility. Gap 2s. In the corridors of power, diplomats weigh consequences. On the streets of Hargeisa, new generations imagine futures unconstrained by old boundaries. Across Africa, leaders and citizens alike grapple with what Somaliland's bid means for their own nations. Could borders shift or identities be reimagined? Gap 2s. The story of Somaliland is no longer just about a flag or a forgotten border. It's a test of Africa's unity, a challenge to the international order, and a window into the dreams of people who refuse to be invisible. Gap 2s. As the world debates, one truth endures. History is not a finished map, but a journey still unfolding, led by those bold enough to chart a new course. Gap 2s. Tomorrow's headlines remain unwritten, but in Somaliland and across Africa, a new chapter is already beginning. Gap 2s. In the quiet moments after the headlines fade, echoes of Somaliland's story ripple outward, reaching distant shores and distant hearts. What began as a struggle for recognition now inspires debates in classrooms, discussions in parliaments, and dreams in communities far beyond its borders. Gap 2s. Every movement for self-determination leaves a legacy, sometimes written in treaties and constitutions, other times whispered in hopes and memories. Somaliland's journey is now part of a larger African narrative, a testament to resilience, to the power of identity, and to the courage it takes to imagine a different future. Gap 2s. As new generations look beyond the maps they inherit, they carry with them the lessons and the questions of Somaliland. Will the world listen? Will the continent change? Or will the echoes of this moment shape aspirations for years to come? Gap 2s. One thing is certain: the story does not end here. Instead, it lives on. In the voices, the choices, and the dreams of those determined to be seen.